A girl walks home alone at night, which has been billed rather cheekily as the first Iranian vampire western set in this fictional Iranian town of Bad City, actually filmed in Taft, California, and an Iranian town, but it's unclear exactly where it is. This is written and directed by Anna Liamapour, who's Iranian-born in Britain, raised in the US, and it's shot in widescreen, black and white. It takes place in Bad City. We meet Arash Morandi's character, who's called Arash, who is this sort of, he's been described both by his director and indeed by the films as the Persian James Dean. He has a 57 convertible, which he worked very hard to get and of which he is very proud. Meanwhile, Sheila Vand is the titular girl who's a sort of shape-shifting presence, who is the central film's enigma. At one moment we see her and she's a young woman alone in her bedroom with what appear to be pop posters from the 80s on the wall listening to vinyl. Another moment she's wearing a chador and on a skateboard, and she looks like she's just kind of walked off the set of Persepolis. In another moment, she's a wraith lurking in the shadows in this way that kind of harks back to Murnau's Nosferatu and Bram Stoker's Dracula. The two meet. In fact, funny enough, they meet after he has gone fancy dressed to a party dressed as Dracula. And what then sort of plays out is a dark romance. I really, really like this film. I like it for a number of reasons. One of the first ones is that it's a film about crossing boundaries. It's black and white, which kind of feels old-fashioned, but it has a very, very modern edge to it. It's Iranian culture, and yet it's filmed in America, and it could be actually a netherworld in between those two things. It crosses genre boundaries all the time. It sort of, at some points, it nods toward Nouvelle Vague. Other times, it nods towards horror movies. Actually, it's sort of much more in the genre of horror movies. But the films that really seem to be in the background of it are Jim Jarmusch's Stranger Than Paradise, or it's like the missing link between the first two Catherine Bigelow movies, The Loveless and Near Dark. Near Dark is one of my favourite films of all time. I absolutely love Near Dark. And then it has this extremely eclectic pop soundtrack, which is sort of mixing these. It's interesting. The writer-director, she used to play bass in a rock band and she's singing in a rock band. She also is a DJ. And you can kind of tell because you get the soundtrack, which is mixing Kiosk and Beirut and Federale and Radio Tehran in a way which is really...
all the hits there.
All the hits.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, nothing but the hits. And then there's this one extraordinary sequence which plays out to White Lie's death, in which the two characters look like they're about to kiss for the first time, and it plays out almost the whole length of the record. The motion is really, really slow. It's all to do with gesture. So, and the language, of course, Persian Farsi, but actually the language of the film is really the language of silent film. It's a very, very bold and evocative first feature. She's already been signed up. She's already now making a second feature, which is described as a cannibal love story, which stars people like Keanu Reeves and Jim Carrey. So, you know, she's arrived in a big way. This played at Sundance. And it's easy to see why it made such a splash. One of the reasons it's so easy is because you can read it in any number of ways. You can read it as a pulp potboiler. You can read it as a film which is a kind of mashup of all the films. She like there's Sergio Leone in there. There's the sense of, you know, the Clint Eastwood Man with No Name. There's a whole Western vibe going on in the background, but it also has this Eraserhead sense underneath it when our characters are walking along by concrete walls and you hear this groaning industrial noise, these great big belching power plants in the background making this groaning industrial sound, which is very much like David Lynch, very much like Alan Spletter, of course, who was his extraordinary sound editor. And that's another thing we should do. What does a sound editor do?
What does a sound editor do?
Well, let's ask the sound editor to write in for another show. Or you can read it as a political parable. You can read it as a kind of modern reinvention of that, you know, the great women's movement Reclaim the Night thing. It is about a character who seems to be marginalised, who is in fact a sort of predatory character. And I loved how slippery it was. I loved the fact that it kept sort of wrong-footing its audience, the fact that it never settled down into being just one thing. Now, there's been lots of interviews with the filmmakers, with the star and with the director, in which they've said things like, well, you know, we absolutely reject the idea of having a feminist label. I understand why people don't want to, you know, have labels on it. I think it's a feminist film. It doesn't matter whether... I remember once having a discussion with Lars von Trier, and he was saying, I said this before, he said the film was about something, and I said, no, it's not. Actually, it wasn't with Lars von Trier. It was with Willem Dafoe on this programme, and I said, I think that Antichrist is about misogyny, and he said, well, it's not. And I said, yeah, you just made it. I watched it. And so, but it is one of those films in which...
That always goes down really well with top actors.
Always goes down really well. He took it absolutely fair. No, but there's a difference between making a film and watching a film. Anyway, it's very, very stylishly done. I think it has a political underpinning, but she never lets a message get in the way of the music. And what you actually get out of it is this tactile love of the genre of cinema. It's made by somebody who's, absolutely steeped on the one hand in pop culture, in pulp culture.
Stop banging the desk.
Sorry, the main boy character, the one who's described as the Persian James Dean, is sort of from the 50s. Our central girl is sort of 80s but timeless. So it's juggling all these things at the same time. What you make of it, I think, is very much up to you. I liked it very much. It was really, really terrific. And I think it's great that in cinemas at the moment, you've got like Girlhood out on the one hand and Girl Walks Home Alone at Night on the other hand. This is a very, very interesting period. These are films that you should seek out. They're not going to be packing out the multiplexes. But, I think it's no surprise to say that I think this is clearly my film of the week.